Fresno police detectives Daryl Green and Al Murrieta responded. An emergency response team had already forced entry into the residence and pronounced the victim dead at the scene.
What's up, Panic Fam? I'm Hannah. And if it's 2 a.m., the lights are off and the popcorn has gone cold, you know, it's Panic TV time. Welcome. If you survived this, and this, congratulations, all right? Congratulations, but your luck runs out here.
In Miami, a university football player and his female friend are found beaten to death. Investigators piece together random fragments from the crime scene, hoping to assemble evidence that will point to the killer. A man is found shot to death in his living room. With no obvious suspect, investigators turn to those closest to the victim and uncover a startling secret. When killers are driven by jealousy and desire, their desperation is evident in both the crime and their efforts to avoid detection. But forensic science can reveal even the slightest mistake. To solve crimes of passion. Sultry Miami Beach, with its hot nights and warm days, is the perfect setting for romance. But when passion is one-sided, jealousy and rage can lead to murder. On April 16, 1996, University of Miami student Darin Thomas was returning to the dormitory he shared with star linebacker Marlon Barnes. Thomas saw that the tires of his SUV were flat. He had just loaned the car to his roommate. Annoyed, he wanted to confront him. When he went into the dorm, Thomas was horrified to find Barnes lying on the floor, covered in blood. He ran next door to call police.
Miami-Dade County Police and Fire, where's your emergency? University of Miami? What building number? Room number?
A patrol officer and an ambulance were immediately dispatched to the apartment.
Attention all units, 332, University of Miami Athletic Dorm. So now if there's a subject on the scene at 1901, Kilo 3105.
Paramedics entered the scene. Marlon Barnes lay motionless on the floor. He'd been severely beaten about the head and face. He was pronounced dead at the scene. In the bedroom, the officer found another victim.
There's a female down, detectives.
A young woman, also badly beaten. Despite efforts to revive her, the victim's vital signs remained weak. Medics needed to get her to a hospital immediately.
bone fragments, okay?
Crime scene investigators arrived and began to carefully search through the apartment, looking for clues. It was eerily undisturbed, suggesting that robbery was not a motive for the attack. Investigators found splinters of wood and shards of metal near the front door. But the wood pieces did not seem to match any of the furniture in the apartment. It may have come from the murder weapon. They also found fragments of teeth and bone, testaments to the savagery of the attacks. Investigators interviewed Darin Thomas. He identified the female victim as 22-year-old 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 Lumpkins. Unfortunately, she too would not survive. Barnes had borrowed his SUV to attend a party at a Miami nightclub. He was not aware of anyone who would want to attack Barnes or 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞. At the Miami-Dade Police Department, Detective Thomas Romani worked the case. From his early assessment of the crime scene, Romani knew the victims were caught by surprise.
We were able to establish that the attack was with a heavy blunt object, and it took place right at the front door and proceeded into the house, and the majority of the trauma sustained to Barnes occurred when he was on the floor.
The victims were autopsied in Dade County. The examination revealed that both victims died as a result of blunt trauma. Barnes and 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 had been hit with such force that impressions of the murder weapon were left on their bodies. Medical examiner Sam Galino noted the distinctive nature of the victim's wounds.
Marlon's wounds were predominantly clustered around his face. Some of them were T-shaped or L-shaped, or had some unusual contours to them that made me think that they were made with some sort of very specific weapon. 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 had some pattern injuries, but they were subtle and they were different, indicating that either it was a different weapon, a different aspect of the same weapon, or possibly that the weapon had somehow altered, such as being broken between when she was assaulted and when Marlon was assaulted. But the bigger mystery in both of the cases was there a specific weapon that we could identify and match to these wounds?
The task of identifying the murder weapon would fall to the Miami-Dade Crime Lab. Thomas Quirk is a firearms and tool mark examiner at the lab. He studied evidence taken from the scene.
I could tell by looking at the wood that it looked like what's called a forend of a shotgun. That is the part of the shotgun that's usually held by the left hand when somebody's firing a shotgun.
The brutality and rage of the crime suggested the killer knew his victims. The next day, news of the campus tragedy stunned the city. Detectives would have to develop leads on a suspect. Investigators met with the victim's close friends and teammates. Barnes and 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 were popular and well-liked by their peers.
Barnes and Lumpkins. I saw them at the Club Salvations.
The football players told us that Barnes and 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 were seen together. Not all of the football players knew their exact relationship. 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 was a friend of Marlon Barnes since they were in high school.
Miami-Dade police also discovered that 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 had an ex-boyfriend, a rap musician named LeBrant Dennis.
LeBrant Dennis was a local of Miami. He had produced some rap videos, and in fact, that's how 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐞 and LeBrant Dennis met.
Police were eager to question 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬's ex-boyfriend, LeBrant Dennis. And they wouldn't have to wait long for answers. The day after the murder, Dennis and a friend showed up at the police station.
And her boyfriend. I need you to research through that, see what you can make out of it.
The ex-boyfriend of the girl was murdered, LeBrant. He's outside. He wants to talk to you.
Oh, good. Very good. Okay. You come out there with me. Very good.
Detective Romani was intrigued by what he found out.
Detective Romani, when I met with him, he didn't have that gangster, rough rap type persona, and I didn't pick up on it. LeBrant was very calm. He was inquisitive as to what occurred. He told me that he didn't have any information about the case. Had you ever had any problems in your relationship with 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬, domestic problems? He gave me some background information about his relationship with 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬, why they broke up. He, in fact, told me that he did not personally know Marlon Barnes. Had you and 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬
Dennis and 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬 dated for 5 years.
Up until a week ago, we moved out of our
There had been some breakups between them through their 5-year relationship as well.
But according to Dennis, things were getting better between them.
Out of your cousin's house?
Yeah.
They were in the process of reconciling. He said he was asleep at his sister's house the night of the murders. Investigators asked to take photographs of his body. Police wanted to see if Dennis had any marks or scratches, signs of a physical altercation.
Yes. Thank you. Can you take off your shirt, please?
But no visible scratches or bruises were found on his body. Dennis also agreed to be fingerprinted. He was acting like a man with nothing to hide. Even though there was nothing glaring, Detective Romani wasn't convinced.
When I was told that LeBrant Dennis responded to the Homicide Bureau to speak to me, I wasn't really surprised, but I was apprehensive. Maybe that he was coming forward to be too helpful. It became clear that he was trying to be very helpful.
Miami-Dade investigators went to Dennis's home. He continued to cooperate. They conducted a thorough search.
We're going to ask that you wait by the door here, okay? We're going to just look in your... Okay.
Looking for anything that might be related to the crime. They found nothing out of the ordinary. Detectives asked Dennis for the clothes he had worn the previous night. The clothes would be examined for traces of blood or hair and fiber evidence, but nothing would be found. They also searched and photographed Dennis's car. But again found nothing suspicious. Despite the lack of evidence, police could not eliminate him as a suspect. Detectives had to expand their search if they were to solve the double murders, and they would need hard evidence to bring the killer to justice. Detectives were struggling to solve the brutal murders of University of Miami football player Marlon Barnes and his friend 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬. Police considered 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬's ex-boyfriend, LeBrant Dennis, a potential suspect, but there was no evidence to link him to the crime. Investigators went to the area outside the nightclub where the victims were last seen. At a 24-hour gas station, a clerk had seen a suspicious man wearing a hooded sweatshirt, pacing back and forth, watching the club across the street. All of this took place at the same time Barnes and 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬 were inside the club partying. The clerk was concerned and called police. By the time they arrived, the man had gotten in a car and left. The clerk said she did not see his face. She gave a precise description of his car, recalling every detail, including the make and model, its tinted windows, and a missing rear license plate. Investigators showed the woman photos of LeBron Dennis's car. She didn't recognize it and was certain about what she had seen. Police needed to locate the car and its driver. They looked further into the background of 𝐃𝐚𝐭𝐞𝐬, trying to find a lead to someone who may have wanted to harm her. They interviewed a number of her friends.
It wasn't a mutual thing at all. She wanted.
Detective Thomas Romani discovered that 𝐃𝐚𝐿e's relationship with LeBron Dennis had been fraught with violence and stalking, a far cry from the mutual breakup that Dennis had described.
It was a very controlling relationship.
And as we spoke to more friends and acquaintances, we learned that 𝐃𝐚𝐿eand LeBron Dennis had an argument early in the week, and she had left him. There had been some violent breakups and domestic violence between them.
Dennis said he was asleep at his sister's home when the murders occurred. Now, detectives weren't convinced. They obtained Dennis's cell phone records. On the morning before the murders, he'd made a call to a man named Stuart Dillard. Investigators were anxious to speak with him.
Hello, we're detectives with the Miami-Dade Police Department. We'd appreciate your cooperation.
They met with Stuart. He was extremely nervous. He, of course, saw the murder on the news, and he was able to put it together that he lent this sawed-off shotgun to LeBron Dennis, and he suspected that the sawed-off shotgun was possibly used in some criminal act.
Stuart Dillard said that on April 14th, one day after the murders, Dennis called him again and told him where to retrieve his shotgun and duffel bag. Inside, Stuart found a large folding knife that was not his, and several articles of clothing. When he looked at his shotgun, Stuart noticed that the wooden fore-end was missing.
He became very afraid of what had happened. He put some things together in his mind, and he thought that he would be culpable or somehow involved.
Stuart told investigators he disposed of the clothing in a dumpster and had thrown the knife and shotgun down a storm drain. All he kept was the duffel bag. Investigators took possession of it, hoping they could tie it directly to LeBron Dennis.
When we first started speaking to Stuart, we were apprehensive about what he was telling us because he did admit that he lent a potential murder weapon to LeBron Dennis. So we did investigate thoroughly what he had to tell us, and we believe what he was telling us was the truth, that he unknowingly lent this firearm to LeBron Dennis.
Dad, it's a knife.
Miami-Dade police went to the storm drain and found the discarded weapons, exactly where Stuart said they would be.
Some water.
Anything else you see down there?
They retrieved the knife and the shotgun.
That's what we're looking for.
I'm gonna go back down and see if there's anything else.
Ugh, I swear my neighbors think I'm probably getting murdered right now.
The weapons were bagged for analysis. Armed with this new evidence, the investigation of LeBrant Dennis intensified. Police interviewed his known acquaintances. Jamie Meyer was a former girlfriend.
Good, how you doing? Is this your car?
She admitted that she often loaned her car to Dennis.
Traffic violations. Do you mind if I take a few photos?
Police saw that her car resembled the suspicious vehicle seen on the night of the murders. An officer photographed the car. The vehicle had no rear license plate, like the vehicle described by the clerk at the gas station. Investigators re-interviewed the gas station clerk.
We showed the photographs of her car to the clerk, and she positively identified that as being the same car she saw on that evening.
Police had established another connection between LeBrant Dennis and the car. But it was highly circumstantial. To link him to the murders, they turned to the forensic evidence. They were confident that the bag had been used to carry the murder weapons. The duffel bag turned over by Dennis's friend Stewart was examined by criminalist Toby Wolson. Wolson found what appeared to be droplets of dried blood inside the bag.
I was asked to do the DNA interpretation of samples taken from a duffel bag, and we did analysis of those and compared those samples to the standards from the victim and the subject.
Wolson found a match between the blood in the duffel bag and the blood of one of the victims.
The DNA profiles obtained from the samples from the bag match the DNA profiles obtained from Marlon Barnes' blood stain standard, which means that those samples came from Marlon Barnes.
Piece by piece, Miami authorities were building their case against LeBrant Dennis. Criminalists had evidence connecting Dennis's gym bag to one of the victims, but it would take more than a blood stain to charge LeBrant Dennis with murder. The murders of University of Miami student Marlon Barnes and his childhood friend 𝐃𝐞𝐭𝐞𝐬 Lumpkins were close to being solved. A wealth of evidence, including a knife and a shotgun, had been discovered. But so far, nothing tied the gruesome double murder directly to ex-boyfriend LeBrant Dennis. Miami-Dade criminalist Thomas Quirk examined the flat tire from the car Barnes had driven the night before he was killed.
I noted that the tire had a very curious V-shaped mark. Once I received the knife and examined the knife, I realized that the tip of the knife was bent and it was very dull. If this was a knife that made the marks, my job would be now to stab the tire with that knife and see if I could reproduce those V-shaped marks.
Quirk analyzed the test cuts against the punctures from the night of the crime. He found the two sets of punctures to be wholly consistent, concluding that Dennis's knife was used to slash the victim's tires. Quirk also examined the shotgun found in the storm drain. He compared wood splinters collected at the crime scene to the now bare forend of the shotgun.
It's no different than building an airplane or building a model car. You take the pieces, you look at them, you notice the fracture patterns to them, the manufacturer's markings, and you simply place them together and make a little mold out of it. And we found that once we did that, it fit perfectly into the frame of the shotgun. chances are that this shotgun was used to bludgeon the 2 victims to death.
In addition to the wood splinters, they also collected metal fragments at the crime scene. Criminalist George Borghi examined the fragments.
At the time that the pieces of metal were found, they were unknown in terms of what the origin was. When the shotgun was recovered and they put all the pieces together, it was obvious from my perspective that it was a broken trigger guard, and the 2 pieces of metal looked like they could be fragments of metal from the trigger guard themselves.
But to prove an exact match between the metal fragments and the trigger guard would require more than the appearance of a close fit.
The molecular structure and the atomic structure of the metal particles are what give it the unique fracture pattern. Not only are the edges compared to show that the edges line up perfectly, in this situation it's a 3-dimensional fracture. So besides the edges comparing favorably, the interior fractures compared favorably, meaning that every contoured edge of one piece fit within the contours of the adjoining piece and of the shotgun. So therefore, a combination of all those characteristics exclude the possibility that those trigger guard pieces came from any other weapon besides that one.
With this evidence, investigators now had probable cause. They charged LeBrant Dennis with the murders of 𝐃𝐞𝐭𝐞𝐬 and Marlon Barnes. But to prove his guilt, police needed direct physical evidence. They once again turned to medical examiner Dr. Sam Galino. Galino had previously noted peculiar L and T-shaped wounds sustained by the victims. Galino compared the evidence to diagrams of the victims' injuries.
And we were able to compare different aspects of the shotgun to the wounds, and indeed found out that different aspects of this shotgun matched, to a great degree of certainty, the wounds that were on both of the bodies. I was able to conclude that this shotgun had been used to beat both Marlon Barnes and 𝐃𝐞𝐭𝐞𝐬.
LeBrant Dennis continued to profess his innocence, despite the strong case against him. But Miami-Dade investigators had amassed a wealth of evidence supporting his guilt, and it had all started with a case of envy.
From the evidence that we were able to establish in this investigation, LeBrant Dennis became extremely upset when he had found out that 𝐃𝐞𝐭𝐞𝐬 went to meet Marlon Barnes at this event that hosted many celebrity football players from the NFL and college.
Investigators were convinced that LeBrant Dennis followed the victims to Marlon Barnes' apartment. When Barnes opened the door, Dennis struck him across the face. When Dennis finished attacking Barnes, he went after 𝐃𝐞𝐭𝐞𝐬. LeBrant Dennis was tried and convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. LeBrant Dennis's violent relationship with 𝐃𝐞𝐭𝐞𝐬 led police to closely investigate him and ultimately solve the crime. But in some cases, there is no obvious suspect. Fresno, California is a quiet, peaceful city, known for its proximity to 3 national parks. On Friday, February 18th, 2000, Nancy and Ralph Gower were making plans for the upcoming weekend.
Yeah, let's do lunch, sure.
Nancy was going to drive to their vacation home that evening.
So you're going to be real busy.
Ralph, who worked as an auto salesman, had to be at the dealership the following morning, but planned to drive up Saturday afternoon. The Gowers had been married for 12 years.
I'll be nice, Wolf.
I can't wait.
Thanks. Be nice.
Let's go.
That night, Nancy drove alone to their vacation house. The next morning, Ralph failed to show up for work. His concerned employer went to his house to check on him. But when she peered through the window, she saw him lying on the floor. Panicked, she tried to get Ralph's attention, but he wasn't moving. She called 911. Fresno police detectives Daryl Green and Al Murrieta responded. An emergency response team had already forced entry into the residence and pronounced the victim dead at the scene.
Take that side off.
There it is.
2 bullet wounds marked the right side of his chest, but there were no shell casings present. The area immediately around the body seemed unusually clean, but detectives noted a small amount of blood under the sofa, perhaps overlooked by the killer.
Unless he was laying here originally.
Notice some of that dust here. Looks like something's been either moved or, well, there's some broken stuff underneath the table.
Something's not right, or the couch has been moved.
It appeared the furniture had been moved.
What initially stood out to the investigators is that we could tell that the couch had been moved and that the scene was extremely clean, indicating that someone had cleaned up the crime scene and moved furniture after the victim had been shot.
Crime scene investigators took photographs and meticulously dusted surfaces for fingerprints. Broken items on the coffee table suggested a struggle had taken place. In the entryway, investigators found a gym bag. Inside the bag was a loaded revolver.
And Bucket, provide us with the serial number on your property sheet so we can check it. So we can get downtown. Maybe see if it was officer. Okay.
Detectives searched the house for signs of a break-in. There were none. The automatic garage door mechanism had been shut off.
It's disengaged from the lock there.
The door could now be opened by hand.
We'll move outside the bottom total perimeter. Find anything over here? No, I just checked that first drawer. I don't know what's in that bag. I haven't checked it. Kind of heavy.
Oh, goodness.
You want to turn these over to Mickey?
The detectives found more weapons in the garage. The assortment of firearms, along with the revolver found in the house, would be sent to a lab for ballistics tests.
Collect this for now.
Detective Murrieta needed to contact the victim's wife.
I'm formulating questions in my mind. First of all, establishing where was she at the time that we believe the murder actually took place, who could alibi for her, and one other striking thing that I needed to clear up, who else had keys to that residence?
While the Fresno police pursued the investigation, Ralph Gower's body was autopsied. The pathologist would make further curious findings. Cause of death was attributed to the 2 bullet wounds to the chest. But pathologist Vinu Gopal noted something more.
At the autopsy, I found evidence of blunt trauma and gunshot wounds to the chest and injuries to the wrist. These injuries were consistent with handcuff injuries.
It appeared that Ralph Gower had been shackled to something before he was shot.
So we have handcuff injuries and somebody's laying on his back. next thing you always think of, is it some sort of an execution-style killing?
Police reached Nancy Gower and informed her of her husband's death.
Detective Maria from earlier.
She was shaken by the news and cooperated with the investigation.
A few things to just clarify on time. Can you tell me where you were Friday night?
The last time she saw her husband was the previous evening, just before she left for the vacation home.
You went back to work and I headed up to the cabin.
She expected Ralph to join her after he finished work, but he never showed up.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I was around.
Detective
Friday
Green
lunch
got a sense of Nancy and Ralph's marriage.
What we found was they were the all-American couple, and from talking to people who worked with both Nancy and Ralph, they were well-liked, and they seemed to be madly in love with each other.
Chance. Well, Nancy, we're going to be needing to talk again, and we'll update you as we get the information. We're still in the early process of the investigation. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Everything that could potentially be a reason for the homicide was discredited, including any financial problems, any problems at work, anything that she thought could have been related, we were able to discredit.
The guns found at the crime scene were sent to the Fresno Crime Lab for testing. Criminalist 𝐒𝐿 tested bullets fired from the gun and compared them against the slugs retrieved from the victim. There were no matches, but characteristics of the slugs led 𝐂𝐿 to the first clue of the killer's identity. He or she had used a .40 caliber firearm. But as the days passed, investigators had yet to develop a motive or suspect.
Remember the hand marks we had on here? Yeah. We were going to take them down and have them fingerprint.
They felt they had only one place to turn.
Get a hold of all the guys that are involved in this and let's meet.
We felt our only option was to bring Nancy in and go deeper into their personal life, including giving her a polygraph to verify some of her earlier statements.
Nancy Gower had cooperated through the entire investigation of her husband's murder.
No motive for the murder. And we need to eliminate you as a suspect, and once we do that...
But to investigators, it seemed as if she had something to hide. In Fresno, California, police were investigating the murder of luxury auto salesman Ralph Gower. With no leads in the case, they asked Gower's wife, Nancy, to take a polygraph exam. She agreed, but just as the test was to begin, she wouldn't continue.
We've got a little bit of a problem. She doesn't want to take the test until she talks to both of you.
She asked to speak with the investigators.
Hi.
I understand you wanted to talk to us for a minute.
Yeah, I really think I should tell you something. Well, we met
She
in a
made a
wedding about
stunning
6
admission
months
to
ago.
Detective Green.
So we started having this.
The bombshell in this case was that Nancy indicated that she was having an affair with one of our police officers. Not only was he a police officer, but prior to coming onto the department, he had been a full-time minister and in fact was a chaplain with the Fresno Police Department, one of our own.
The officer's name was Paul Hurth. Nancy told the detectives that she and Hurth had been involved for several months, but she said she recently ended the affair. Hurth couldn't accept the breakup and continued calling her.
You know, he's also a Baptist minister, so I didn't want anybody
Investigators now faced the possibility of a killer in their ranks.
When Ralph was at work, sometimes we do that.
After Nancy's admission, she took the polygraph and passed.
You had a question about talking about...
An internal committee was formed to investigate.
We knew we had to hurry on this case. If a police officer was the suspect and we were allowing an officer to continue to work and he was a murder suspect, speed was of the utmost. Oh, thanks.
Police checked the staff sign-in sheet for the night of Ralph's murder.
Is there any indication they were supposed to work that night?
No, should have been his regular day off.
All right. Is that on
According to the sheet, Officer Hurth and his partner were on duty during the time in question.
later what's going on in this? Thanks.
When investigators spoke with Hurth's partner, he said that he had not worked that night and had not initialed the sign-out sheet.
With you. Do you work with Paul Hurth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Were you
It appeared Officer Hurth was attempting a cover-up. Police called him in for questioning.
Hi, Paul. Sergeant Green with Homicide. This is Detective Marietta. I want to talk to you about the death of Ralph Gower. Occurred about a week ago.
Actually, I was expecting a call from him.
Really?
But, hey, look, I didn't do
Hurth was forthcoming about the affair, but denied committing any crime.
I may have broke some police rules, but again, I didn't murder anybody.
Okay, well, that's kind of what we thought. We were wondering if maybe you couldn't fill us in a little bit. Were you working February 18th?
Yes.
Oh, you were?
Yes. Yeah, I was on patrol at a college campus.
He stated that he had been on patrol on the 18th.
And I broke up the fight.
You were,
They asked
you
about
were
his
with,
partner.
A partner that night?
It was Officer Andre Benson.
So he was working?
No, I signed him in, but he wasn't there.
Oh, he didn't show up? Or?
I signed him in, but he didn't show up.
Okay.
If you could slap one character for their dumb decisions, who would it be? Huh? Go on. Vent in the comments. I can't wait to read.
Could we look in your locker?
When they asked Hurth if they could search his house and his work locker, he agreed.
Take a look at your gun?
That'd be okay.
Okay, good. Let's go down to, let's go out this way and take a look at, okay, could you step right back over? Okay.
They took his police-issued equipment along with his uniform. Inside the officer's home, investigators located his service weapon. It was a .40 caliber Beretta, the same caliber gun used in the killing of Ralph Gower. Criminalists Iqbal Sikhan and Gary Kortner received Hurth's weapon. The gun was fired into a sealed water tank. Fired slugs from Hurth's pistol would be compared to the slugs that killed Ralph Gower. Police waited anxiously for results to see if the gun used to uphold the law would be the same weapon used to break it. Fresno police were investigating fellow officer Paul Hurth. They believed he had murdered the husband of his former lover, Nancy Gower. Criminalist Iqbal Sikhan performed a side-by-side comparison of slugs fired from Officer Hurth's handgun and the bullets that killed Ralph Gower. Sikhan looked at several class characteristics, including the caliber, the direction of the twist, and the lands and grooves of the slugs. The results pointed directly at the suspect.
The bullets that killed the victim came out of Paul Hurth's duty pistol.
Paul Hurth was arrested for the murder of Ralph Gower. When he was confronted with the evidence, he quickly changed his story.
Paul, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can't.
Officer Hurth now claimed he went to the Gower house with the sole intention of apologizing for his indiscretions with Ralph's wife.
I know you having relations with your wife. With my wife? Yeah, how's the matter with you?
When Hurth told him about the affair, he became enraged and attacked the officer. He said during the struggle, Ralph got control of his baton. He said he went into police mode and drew his gun. After shooting Ralph twice, he panicked and proceeded to clean up the room. Finally, he let himself out through the garage and returned to work.
Be honest. Did you watch the last scene through your fingers? Comment yes or no.
Hurth's claim of shooting Ralph Gower in self-defense rang hollow with investigators.
Slightly higher as it exits.
To test the officer's story, they re-examined the crime scene reports.
Spots about the size of a $50, 50-cent piece. About a dime, yeah, 10 cents. Yeah.
They believed the angle of the bullet wounds to Gower's chest proved he'd been shot from above at a distance of 2 feet while lying defenseless on the floor. Investigators returned to the Gower house.
6 feet 3. He was on the ground at that time.
Right. Okay.
Yes. And let's see if there is any other evidence of any damage.
They
to the
scoured
wall.
the crime scene for any indication of bullet damage to the walls. If the victim had been standing, as Hurth claimed, the bullets would have passed through his body and there would be damage to the walls. But there was none.
Possible scenario is that the victim was.
All the crime scene evidence supported the case that Officer Hurth was standing over the victim when he fired.
Or he could be here.
Despite convincing evidence, prosecutors know juries are often reluctant to convict officers of the law. Fresno authorities turned to the FBI. Police enlisted the help of forensic profiler and criminalist Mark Safaric. As a special agent with the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, Safaric studies crime scene photos and other evidence from individual cases. From the case materials, he developed a profile of the dynamics that took place between the victim and the assailant. His conclusions in the Gower case contradicted Paul Hurth's claims of self-defense.
I think both behaviorally and forensically, it's clear that Gower was not in a position to present a threat to Hurth. There's no indication his hands were in front of his face or attempting to ward off the potential of being shot. And the fact that the gunshot wounds are so close together, almost directly over the heart area, tells me that he was likely unconscious at the time he was shot.
Based on the evidence, police believe that Paul Hurth went to Ralph Gower's house with no other intention but to kill him. Nancy Gower had ended the affair, and he needed to dispose of his rival. Investigators believe Hurth struck Gower with his baton, then proceeded to handcuff him to a table leg before shooting him twice in the chest. Investigators concluded that Paul Hurth acted alone, and Nancy had no knowledge of his intentions. Paul Hurth was convicted of aggravated manslaughter for the death of Ralph Gower. He was sentenced to 20 years. Killers commit their crimes for many reasons, but when they are driven by dark emotion, they unwittingly leave behind a history of clues. Forensic science exploits these clues to uncover hard evidence and solve crimes of passion.